We are in a sermon series currently entitled The Last Word. And this is our way of looking at the last couple of books of the Old Testament that are often called the minor prophets. Each of these 12 prophetic books has a little bit of a different message, a little bit of a different personality. And what we've been doing is looking at each of them individually and kind of looking at the last word. Like, what is it that they teach us about who God is and what he expects? This week we'll be in the book of Amos, and we'll be here for 2 weeks. So next week we'll see the last word of Amos. This week we're kind of going to just explore the general theme. Amos was a shepherd, and he was a farmer from Judah, which was the southern kingdom. Remember, after King Solomon, Israel split into 2 kingdoms, one in the north called Israel, one in the south called Judah. Amos was from Judah, but he was called by God to prophesy to Israel. So this shepherd and this farmer makes his way north to Israel with a message for them from God. Now, when God speaks, we should listen, right? And what we're going to discover in Amos is that God had a message that was very unexpected. In fact, I would say when I first understood this passage, like the first time I really let it sit in me, I was shocked, I was challenged, I was a little frightened, and I was certainly convicted. And so I want to start today in Amos chapter 5, all right? With what I think is one of the most difficult passages in the whole Bible to hear. All right, so Amos chapter 5, verse 21, it says, I hate. Now, you understand, when God starts with I hate, we should pay attention because we generally don't think of God as hateful. We think of God as loving. You know, the Bible tells us that God is love. And how can a person who is love, who is characterized by love, who defines love, how can they begin by saying, I hate, and yet that's what God says here. I hate, I despise your feasts, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Now understand, earlier in the Old Testament, in the early books, God laid down the law. He gave the law to Moses, and part of that for the Jewish people was that they had a series of feasts that they would observe every year. And these feasts were designed to teach them about God and bring them closer to him. And now here is God saying, you know those feasts that I told you to do? When you do those, I hate it. Oh, and by the way, those offerings that I told you to offer, also part of the early law. They were to bring offerings to the tabernacle and the temple as a sign of their repentance of their sin. God says, when you make those offerings that I told you to make, I hate it. I despise it. He goes on. He says, in the peace offerings of your fattened animals, I will not look upon them. So Israel, when you come to me with these offerings trying to make peace with me, I want nothing to do with it. This doesn't sound like the God I normally talk about, does it? And you can understand why I say this is, to me, one of the most frightening, challenging, convicting passages in the Bible. He goes on. He says, take away from me the noise of your songs. To the melody of your harps, I will not listen. I think this part maybe strikes home a little bit more because we don't actually have feasts that we observe, and we don't actually have offerings like sacrifices that we give. But we sing every week, don't we? And how would it feel if we're singing our songs and then God just speaks to us and says, boy, that sounds awful. That noise is like a racket. I wish you'd just stop. Take it away. What's going on here? Why is God speaking so strongly to Israel? So this week, Marianne and I got to have dinner with some old friends, Jason and Amy. I think they're watching today, so hey, Jason and Amy. And Amy, our friend Amy, ordered Brussels sprouts. And the place we were eating has really, really good Brussels sprouts. They like grill them, and I don't know, they put oil and I don't know what they put on it. They're like shiny and cool. They're tasty, all right? And so they brought out all of our meals, and you know, Amy had her side of Brussels sprouts, and they looked really good. And she kind of looked at her dish, and then she said, "Oh no," because right in the middle of those delicious-looking Brussels sprouts was a hair. And it wasn't the same color as any of ours. And so the manager happened to be at another table, and so we called her over, and he said, found this hair in the Brussels sprouts. And what the manager did not say to us was, we cooked them the way we normally do. And she didn't say, I don't know, they look pretty good. I'm sure they're going to taste fine. No, she took them away. because she knew if she hadn't taken them away, we would have demanded, take them away. Now, why did we want the Brussels sprouts taken away? They were made the way they're normally made. They looked delicious, but there was one little thing wrong. And that one little thing that was wrong made them all really, really bad. That's what's going on with Israel. You know, they're worshiping like they always have. They're having their feasts. They're offering their sacrifices. They're singing their songs, probably right out of the book of Psalms. It looks pretty good from a distance. But God is saying there's something going on here in addition to all of the motions that you're going through that makes all of it awful. And I want nothing to do with it. So we're going to this morning do a little bit of an autopsy on Amos's message. We're going to go back now. We got to this point in chapter 5. Now let's go back and see if we can figure out what is going on in Israel that has God so irate, that has him so frustrated with his people. So turn back to Amos chapter 1. Amos chapter 1 verse 3, it says, "Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment." Now, Damascus is not an Israelite city. It's actually a city in the country of Syria, which is to the north of Israel. They're one of Israel's biggest enemies. And so Amos, he begins his sermon to Israel by saying, God's going to punish your enemy. That'll preach, right? He probably got a couple of amens. Like, God's going to bring down punishment on Damascus. And people are like, yeah, preach it, Amos. This is good news. Now, when he says for 3 transgressions, even 4, what he's saying is they sin, and they sin, and they sin, and they keep on sinning, right? So 3 and then 4. So it just keeps going. It is because they sin and they keep sinning, I'm going to punish them. And he gets specific. He says, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing sledges of iron. Gilead was an Israelite city. So the city of Damascus had attacked an Israelite city and destroyed it. And so when God says, I'm going to punish them, everybody in Israel says, yes, that is right, that is fair, that is just, good, we're glad to hear it. But Amos doesn't stop there. He keeps going. He goes on a couple verses later. He says, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment. Gaza is the capital of Philistia, another one of Israel's enemies. And he goes on. He says, for 3 transgressions of Tyre, and for 4. For 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4. He's going through all of Israel's enemies. And you can just imagine, every time he says, here's another enemy, another group of people that have treated us wrongly, that have treated us unfairly, that have attacked us, that have enslaved us. They're going to be punished. And everybody's like, yes, you go, Amos. This guy's awesome. And then he gets to chapter 2, verse 4, and he says, for 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4. Now, Judah, they're like Israel's cousins. Not the same country anymore, but they used to be. They're still the people of God, just like Israel. Right? In fact, the temple is in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. And so it seems a little strange to them, but at the same time, you know, they're not the same country. They are enemies. And so the people are like, okay, cool. Yeah, God's going to bring judgment on Judah. We're good with that too. And then he gets to verse 6. He says, thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because they sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. God says, you too, Israel. Can you imagine if Amos is preaching this sermon, how the mood in the room changed, right? Everybody's excited. Yes, all right, Amos, go, you go. We like this message. You're going to destroy all of our enemies. Yes, great. And then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, God's going to destroy you too. And people are like, oh, he was preaching, now he's meddling. But Amos is giving a really important message to Israel that I think is a message we need to hear as well. So as we go through this quick summary of the book, there's 4 principles I'm going to show you as we go. And the first one is this: don't think too highly of yourself. It would have been really easy for Israel to look at what God was doing to the people around them and say, they're bad, but we're good. Right? They're unrighteous, but we're righteous. They're evil, but we're good. We've got things right. The reality is, we can do that too, don't we? It's so easy for us to look around and see other people and say, well, they're doing that wrong. And that guy over there, he's doing that wrong. And that group, they're doing that wrong. And the reason we like to point out other people's failures and other people's shortcomings is it makes us feel better about ourselves, right? Because if they're all really bad, that makes me feel really good about myself. I start to think more highly of myself. But what God is saying to Israel through Amos is, don't think so highly of yourself. You are actually just like them. You see, before God, we're all on the same level. All of us fall short. That's why at the gathering, one of our core beliefs, our core values is that nobody's perfect. And that nobody extends to all of us, right? None of us are perfect. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. We recognize that before God, all of us are on the same footing. That's why Jesus makes such a difference. Because it's only through Jesus that God sees me as righteous. It's only through Jesus that God is willing to adopt me as his own. That's why here we say everybody's welcome at the gathering. Nobody's perfect and everybody's welcome. In fact, we say we want everybody to come as they are. If I borrow from the Backstreet Boys, we don't care where you've been. I don't know. I'll start doing the dance with it. We don't care, right? Everybody's welcome here. We want everybody to come as they are. But here's the thing. We hope that everybody will leave a little bit different. Because our core belief is that nobody's perfect. Everybody's welcome. Come as you are. But we believe that if you are open to hearing the word of God, and if you are open to letting Jesus have some input on your life, he will change you. And so our belief is that we want you to come as you are. You are welcome no matter what you've been up to. I don't care what you did on Saturday night. You're welcome here on Sunday morning. But we hope that by being here, you'll be changed. We hope that Jesus will demonstrate his grace to you and that grace will work something really awesome in you. But in Israel, as Amos is speaking to them, they're kind of like, nah, we're doing pretty good here. And so God needs to make it clear to them why they're not doing pretty well. So he keeps going in verse 7. He says, those who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and turn aside the way of the afflicted. Do you see what Amos is talking about here? He's talking about how we treat other people. So up to this point in the Minor Prophets, we've really been focused on our vertical relationship, the relationship between us and God. And we've had a lot of emphasis on idolatry because that was a big deal in Israel. There was a lot of idolatry going on. Now we've turned it a little bit. Now we're talking about our horizontal relationship, a relationship with each other. And God says, look, if you don't have your horizontal relationship right, then your vertical relationship won't be right either. And watch how this takes effect. He goes on, he says, a man and his father go into the same girl, so that my holy name is profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge. Essentially, that means they're doing inappropriate things in the places of worship with each other, like we would say perverted things, and they're doing it on stolen goods. So it's like they're getting everything wrong. Their relationship with each other is wrong. Their relationship with God is wrong. Everything is wrong. And in the house of their God, they drink the wine of those who have been fined. So it's like they steal the communion juice and then drink it and talk about how great they are. And God says, stop it. This is why he doesn't want to hear their songs of worship. This is why he doesn't want to see their sacrifices. So here's principle number 2. Principle 1 is don't think too highly of yourself. Principle 2 is don't act only for yourself. The people in Israel are at this place where all they care about is me. Now, in this time, they're experiencing great prosperity. You read through Amos and you see this. They live in big houses and they're building bigger houses. They've got everything they want. They're super comfortable. The problem is they're using that comfort to become more comfortable. They're using their power to become more powerful. They're using their resources to gain more resources. They're using their positions to gain greater positions. They're only thinking of themselves. A great example of this is one of the kings who's shortly before Amos's time. His name is King Ahab. And maybe some of you remember that name. He was married to Queen Jezebel. And Ahab and Jezebel lived in the palace, and right next to their palace was a vineyard that was owned by a guy named Naboth. Ahab decided he wanted that vineyard, so he went to Naboth and he said, tell you what, if you'll give me your vineyard, I'm going to give you a bunch of vegetables. This sounds like the worst trade in human history. Right? Vineyards are awesome. They're beautiful. They're full of grapes, which is God's favorite fruit, at least in my opinion. I like the green ones the best. But it's full of grapes. With the grapes, you can make wine. There's so much good about a vineyard. And he's like, hey, give me this great vineyard. I'll give you some beans and Brussels sprouts, maybe with a hair in them. And Naboth says, no, thank you, king. That's not a great trade. He said, besides, this vineyard's been in my family forever. God gave it to us. I don't want to give it away. So Ahab went home. And if you read in 1 Kings 21, this is actually what it says. He threw himself down on the couch and pouted. And Queen Jezebel comes in, what's wrong with you? And Ahab, I'm assuming in like a whiny little king voice, says, I want that vineyard next door, and Naboth won't give it to me. And so Jezebel just like, I'll take care of this. So she goes out and she hatches a plan. She has the people in Jezreel, which is where Naboth lives, throw a party for him, and he's the guest of honor at this party. And then during the party, she recruits 2 people to come in front of everybody falsely accuse him. So now he gets put on trial. They stick to their story. He's convicted and executed, and because he's dead, the king just takes his vineyard. Do you see what happened here? Ahab and Jezebel, they've got all the power. They've got more resources than anybody. They've got the positions, and they use them to gain more. And they gain more by stomping on Ahab. Why? Because all they're thinking about is themselves, and they're only acting for themselves. And this problem is rampant in Israel. Everywhere in Israel, the powerful are growing more powerful. The wealthy are growing more wealthy. Those with position are getting higher positions, and they're doing it all on the backs of the poor and the needy and the oppressed. And God says, I've had it. Don't come in here and worship me while you're treating your brothers and sisters like that. Your horizontal relationship impacts your vertical relationship. But God has an answer. He has a solution. Go back to Amos 5. We get to that super troubling passage where God says, I hate, I despise, take it away. But then he gets to verse 24 and he gives the solution. He says, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. You see what God's doing here? He's putting the 2 relationships together. Righteousness, that's our vertical relationship. Justice, that's our horizontal relationship. And he's saying, I want you to live as people of righteousness and as people of justice, and I want it to just go on and on and on like a river or like a stream. Now, if you look at these 2 words and trace them through the Old Testament, what's really cool is that you'll notice very quickly whenever the 2 words appear together, it's almost always referencing someone who's in power, like a king. Often when a new king would come into power, they would be told, you are to lead the people into righteousness, vertical relationship, and you are to lead the people into justice, how they treat one another. Because God expected those with power, those with position, those with resources, to use those for his mission, not for themselves. And this brings us to our 3rd principle for the day. Our 3rd principle is this: do think about what God has provided. You understand, the more I think about what I don't have, the more I start to grab for what others have. That was Ahab, right? He's got a palace. He probably has the best place to live in the whole country. And what's he focused on? What he doesn't have, right? I want that vineyard. And so because he doesn't have that, he tries to grab for something that's not his. When we focus on what we don't have, it leads to us grabbing for what others have. And so God says, instead of focusing on what you don't have, start to focus on what I've given you. Right? So I don't think any of you are a king or a queen or a prince or princess. I mean, if you are, that's cool. I know some of you think you're princesses. Dad, be careful about that, all right? We all have power. We all have resources. We all have position. It's different for all of us, right? Some have more, some have less, but all of us have that. In fact, let me say it a different way. All of us, every single one of us, and if you're watching online, you too, every single one of us has more than we need. right? Some of us have a lot more than we need. Some of us have a little more than we need, but all of us have more than we need. And all of us have things that we don't need at all. Now, when you think about those things that you have more than enough and those things that you have that you don't need at all, do you ever ask yourself, why did God give me this? Why did God give me more than I need? Why did God give me stuff that I don't need? And have you ever stopped to think that maybe he didn't give it to you for you? Maybe the reason God gave you more than enough is so that you could give to someone who doesn't have enough. And maybe the reason God gave you things you don't need is so that you could give to those who have need. But see, this all starts with how we think. If I'm always thinking about what I don't have, then I'm trying to take from others. But when I start to think about what God has given me, now I'm ready to give to others. And that leads us to our fourth principle for the morning, which is this: do act for those who have less. You see, Jesus taught us that to whom much is given, much is expected. And when he gives us a lot, he wants us to do a lot. He's our example in this, isn't he? I mean, think about what Jesus had everything, right? He is the creator of everything. He's the God of the universe. He had it all. And instead of just sitting in heaven saying, this is all for me, he gave it all up for us. He gave everything he had so that we could be with him. And it's when I am starting to give away what I have for others that I'm more like him. Let me show you one more verse from Amos because I think it will help us understand how this works. Also, it's just a fun verse to read. This is Amos 4:1. It says this: "Hear this word, you cows of Bashan." That's what the Bible says, right? By the way, he does more of this in chapter 6 if you want to read more of the offensive language. This is kind of how Amos reads from beginning to end, though. Mary Ann said to me, when I hear Amos, I think of George Costanza's dad at Festivus. And some of you have no idea what that's about, but some of you do, right? Like, I got a lot of problems with you people. That's kind of God to Israel all through Amos. I got a lot of problems with you. But listen to what he says. This is why he has a problem. This is the important part. "Hear this, you cows of Bashan, who are on the mountains of Samaria, who oppress the poor and who crush the needy." You're using what you have to get more by taking it from others. You're using what you have to get more by crushing the people around you. Now, if I want to be the opposite of that, which I should, right? Then how do I be the opposite of that? Well, here's what I think it looks like. Then I devote my life to empowering the poor and reviving the needy. Let me explain what that means. So to empower the poor simply means I use what I have to help others take their next step, right? Because there are some people in this world who are just falling a little behind. And all they need is a little bit of help. And if I have what can help them, why would I not want to help them along? Why would I not want to empower them? And when I choose to use what I have for myself instead of them, what am I doing? I'm oppressing them, right? I'm holding them down. And to revive the needy, Amos said you're crushing the needy. That word is the word for suffocating. Do you understand that when someone suffocates, they die? And what Amos is saying is people are literally dying because no one will reach out to them and help. To revive someone is to breathe life back into them. If I have the means, the power, the resources, the position, if I have the means to breathe life into someone who is dying, why would I not do that? One of the great joys of my life is that I get to be a part of a church that does this really well. Because you guys do. You're so generous. Your financial generosity, the way you give, has allowed us over time to increase our monthly gift that we give. So every month we give $1,500 away to local ministries who are doing this, who are empowering the poor, who are reviving the needy. And that's because of what you guys give. But you go beyond that. Many of you are active in different places, serving others, helping others, lifting others up. And it's so exciting for me to be a part of that. But my hope is that we can continue to do that and more, because I know that we can. So this morning I asked Annie to come. Annie kind of runs all of this for us. And I asked Annie to come and just take a couple minutes and really practically share with us what we can do to empower the poor and revive the needy.
The reason that we've been focused on Mark Twain is because we know a high percentage of the families in this district are living in poverty. And so now what we'd like to do is donate our time to help the school. You can work with the kids if you're available during the school day. And also, we're focusing on blessing our teachers. So we are going to be creating a sunshine crew that's going to go through the halls of the school and just bless the teachers with different treats, snacks, materials for their classroom. And that commitment is really only 1 hour per month. So that's a fantastic way to uplift the teachers, and we know that as we do that, they have more time and energy to uplift and help our students as well. The next project is at Family Promise, and this is a homeless shelter in Lebanon. It's a very special place because they have renovated this old motel, and so people who are experiencing homelessness and have children with them can actually live in their own room, and kids can have normalcy during this crisis. And it's actually a network of churches who provide the meals, who have refurbished each room. And what the gathering has been doing over the past several months is beautifying the grounds around the new building. And we've sent some volunteers to do yard work. And what this does is it creates a clean, inviting place where people go for help when they have nothing. And so we are going to continue doing some beautification. If you like to work outside, if you like to get your hands dirty, you can sign up for this particular project on Saturday, September 30th. The next project, if you don't love working outside, but you'd like to work inside, we are doing a project at Threads. You might remember the hygiene kits that people put together here, families with young children came to church back in May, and they put together little packages of toiletries. We sent out 500 of those packages to people in need through Threads, which is a clothing store. It's run on donations of gently used clothing, and people in need can come and shop for whatever they need, and they can also get toiletries. And so we are going to take that even a step further. And while parents are shopping, we're going to provide some fun activities for the kids. We're going to feed them. And we're just going to provide some joy for them for that one day. Now, all of these opportunities can lead into ongoing service volunteering if you are interested in doing that. But this is a great way to come together with your friends from the gathering and serve our community all together, and then just learn about each of these ministries. If you're not available on the 30th, that's okay, because we are going to be holding a clothing drive here at church. If you want to clean out your closets, we're looking particularly for kids' clothes because they completely ran out of clothes during this back-to-school season. So we need kids' clothes. We also need men's activewear. And so you can bring those to church with you over the next 3 Sundays. There'll be a donation bin in the lobby, and we are going to take those to Threads with us when we go and serve there on the 30th. So thank you so much. I can't wait to see all of you out there just spreading God's love in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. So maybe you can't make it on the 30th, but you still want to be involved. You can write a note to Annie on your connection card. She'll help you find a place where you can serve, and she would love to give you more information about all of those if you just leave her a note on your connection card. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is telling kingdom parables. And for the first 2 parables, he begins by saying the kingdom of heaven is like. And then he tells a parable of a wedding with lambs, and he tells a parable of a master who goes away on a long trip. But he says the kingdom of heaven is like. And so he's painting a picture. He's using symbolism to help people understand the kingdom of heaven. But then he gets to the third part of Matthew 25, and he doesn't begin by saying the kingdom of heaven is like. He simply says when, which means that this is no longer symbolic. It's no longer imagery. Now Jesus is actually saying this is going to happen. So Jesus is now telling his disciples about a future event, and he's helping them understand and prepare for it. So he says this in Matthew 25:31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Now, Jesus often refers to himself as the Son of Man. And so here he's painting a picture of his second coming. He said, when I come again, so he's already here for his first coming, but when I come again, that second time Jesus comes, he will sit on the throne. He will be King Jesus. He will rule the earth. Verse 32, he says, before him will be gathered all the nations. That's everybody. And he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And so at the end of all times, all people who have ever lived, living and the dead, will be gathered together before Jesus, and they'll be split into two groups, just two groups. Group one is those who follow Jesus. Group two is those who don't. And he says this, and he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. Let's pray.